Welcome to A Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club. My name's Noddy, joined as always by Stevo. And in this episode number 10, we're going to talk about the game just played against the Demons, a few general topics in the AFL, VFL, the game ahead against the Magpies, and finish off with all of our tips for the rest of the round. So to all you Cygnets and Swanlings out there, fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a very biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved Bloods. On Saturday, the 8th of May, in front of almost 36,000 people at the MCG, the fourth place Swans came up against the first place Demons in a wet and at times dour affair. The Swans had many opportunities to get in front of the Dees, but ultimately couldn't capitalise on our chances, going down by 9 points to the still unbeaten Demons, who scored 10-7-67 to our 8-10-58. Okay, Stevo, first impressions. What do you think of that, mate?
Oh, look, honestly, I was a little bit deflated after the game because it felt really winnable. But, Melbourne are a good team and we didn't make the most of our opportunities. But then besides being deflated, I guess I was kind of positive too because I didn't really feel like I was watching a top four team play a bottom half of the ladder team. It felt much more like a top four team playing a bottom half of the 8 team, which is about where we are. So it made me think that at least we're not too far off because we really did push one of the better teams.
Definitely, and I think I'll mirror your thoughts there and say I had mixed emotions. It was obviously good to see us come back into the game after an awful second quarter, which we'll work through after this. But it's good to know that we can mix it with the best, and these guys are the best. They're 8-0, and we're going to talk about that later on as well. But absolutely gutted to not have beaten them. Yeah, we were right in that game, but a combination of the pressure and the weather forced us to make a few bad decisions. And we just didn't convert anywhere near enough. But, them's the breaks, mate. All right, what were your key takeaways?
I guess, and this sort of it builds on what I was saying before and what you've just been saying now, that we keep playing well against the strong teams. If we think that in the AFL this year there's probably 7 contenders, which is the current top 8 plus ourselves, that most media people are agreeing on. Every time we've played one of those, we've either been in the game very late or we've won well, and that's against Brisbane. We won well. Against Richmond, we had a really good win. Against Geelong, we were in the game at the end and managed to get the win, and then against Melbourne, we were in the game at the end and didn't quite get the win. So that's 4 really strong results. Really, if you don't think that a loss is a bad result necessarily, because we did have a very good game. So it's 4 very good performances against good sides. And that tells me that we've got the game style and the ability to compete at a high level with the best teams consistently, which I think is really exciting in a season that we came into thinking it was very much a development year.
Yeah, mate, I'll add a few things to that. One about the team and then 2 about a couple of players. We're the first team this year to have lost to Melbourne by only single digits. All other teams have lost by double digits, at least the lowest being 18, the highest being 50, the average margin of 30 points. And that includes other top 8 teams like the Cats, who the Dees beat by 25, and the Tigers, who the Dees beat by 34. In terms of individual players, I just thought Callum Mills was incredible. Stepped up and played a very captains-like knock. I don't think he's the captain. He's part of the leadership group, but it just looked like one of those performances by a captain that very nearly got us back into the game. But I just think he's so much more influential when he runs through the midfield. We'll talk about him later as well. Buddy, King Bud, Lance Franklin. Either he's still injured or he was truly beaten by a rather impressive Stephen May. And it's probably the latter, but maybe some of the former as well. But, we can talk about that later on in the preview section as well. I'm going to move straight on to quarter by quarter breakdown. And in the first quarter, it was a draw, 3 goals apiece. So we won the first quarter. In the second quarter, it was 2 goals 5 to 0 goals 4. So we were comprehensively beaten in the second quarter. Third quarter, it was 3 goals apiece again. In fact, we were the winner there because we got 3 goals, 1 behind. So we won the third quarter. And then the fourth quarter was 2 goals apiece. But it was 2-1 to the Dees and 2-2 to us. So we won 3 quarters out of 4 and had a shocking second quarter. All right, Stevo, throw me some numbers, mate. What stats have you picked up this week?
First number for me this week was 8, and that's how many goals we got, which it's just not enough to beat most teams, let alone one of the better teams. Especially that period from late in the first quarter till early in the third quarter, which was nearly an hour, and we didn't get any goals at all. So yeah, as scoring output, 8 was a very disappointing number. And then center clearances, we won 17-4, which is a smacking out of the center clearances, but we only scored 1 behind from center clearances. So even though we're getting those center clearances, they're not so effective. Either they're often quite scrappy kicks, which Melbourne are then able to rebound or contain. We're not getting that really clean, out of the top of the square, run through, hit a target, kick a goal type center clearance. So these sort of numbers can be misleading sometimes. You'd think a lot of days you get 17 goal or 17 center clearances to 4. You're going to see that on the scoreboard, but we didn't. So yeah, that was my main stats for this week.
Yeah, I'll mention something that's a bit related to that, because we also won the inside 50 count. We had 58 to Melbourne's 46, so plus 12, which is a very good outcome. But if you look at the way what those inside 50s looked like, a lot of them were just kicks that had barely made it inside the 50-meter arc, or they'd gone to a pack and then we weren't able to crumb. So they weren't really quality inside 50s. It was actually the lowest percentage of this year. So we had the lowest percentage of inside 50s turn into goals. So this is the number that we keep talking about every week, where 30% is very good if you want to try and be in the top echelon of the competition. We had 14%. So it was lower than the Suns, which I think was 17% off the top of the head. Although the Dees were they were quite low as well. They only had 22% on their side of the stats. So we weren't scoring as many goals from our inside 50s. And also in terms of overall conversion, so any scoring shot, so that includes a behind, or even a rush behind, if you look at it like that, we had 44%. And the D's had 59, 60%. So they beat us on that front. But it was actually our second lowest of the year, the lowest being the Bombers game at 39%, which we won. So, we can take these stats with a grain of salt, but I think the picture of this game was that we didn't score enough goals, even though we probably should, coming out of the centre, and the fact that we had all those inside 50s. So, yeah, disappointing. All right, mate, what were your favourite moments of the game, and any what ifs, if you want to add to that?
Okay, I'll think of the what ifs and come back to that maybe. But my favourite moment, it was really early in the game actually. We were sort of texting in the first quarter, I think, and there was that moment where Goulden gets a really great goal assist to Will Hayward, and then we had a good forward half turnover. The ball came out, Goulden grabs it, and he showed really, really good composure to sort of think his way through that, because he's got the ball just outside the 50. The instinctive thing a lot of the time, he's under a lot of pressure, is just to blast it. But he didn't. He managed to identify a teammate in that little pocket of space, and he hit him up beautifully. And Hayward went back and kicked the goal. And look, he's 18 years old. We keep talking about how composed he is and how impressive he is. And I think sometimes Goulden, we expect him to be playing like a third or fourth year player already. We need to remember that this is his second month of AFL footy, and he's still looking very, very good. So that was one of my favourite moments from the game. And then one that we should point out too, the bloke with the big red finger in the crowd for the Swans. This guy is my new favourite Swans fan. He's amazing. I hope we see him more often at the games. I hope he gets up to Sydney for Collingwood and beyond, or if he's Melbourne based, we're not sure. But he's there right on the boundary line with his massive big red finger like they have in the American sports, like the ice hockey and stuff, having a great chat to McDonald while he was getting ready for his shot for goal. I don't know what was said. I would love to know what was said. But
looked like he was getting stuck into him. It was fantastic, wasn't it? And he was sipping on the beer with his normal hand, and he had the record out, and he had all his mates around him. And I think his missus at one point was like, "Babe, you better dial it down a bit. You're on TV." But oh mate, I loved it. And he had a shiner, so he clearly gone hard in the at I'm assuming footy. But big red finger. I hope we can see a bit more of him this year, eh?
He was fantastic. Yeah, absolutely one of my off-field highlights of the year.
What a shout out. Big red finger. Keep doing your thing. Fantastic. All right, mate. Mine, mate, were 4 minutes remaining in the third quarter. and it's the play leading to and including Papley's only goal. So Papley kicked 1-3 this game. That goal got us back within 10 points towards the end of the third quarter. So the play starts with Rowbottom, who played very well for Mind. He tackles Petrarca and gets him holding the ball again somewhere near our defensive 50. There's a quick play on. Parker grabs it, handballs to Mills. Mills does a long kick to Sinclair, who drops it, one of many on the night. But it was wet, so I won't be too hard on him. Warner gathers, runs and guns. I love that bloke. Kicks inside 50 to Papley in space, who turns and goals. Bangs it on his right foot and it goes through. And then it just felt like a little bit like that goal against the Cats, where Papley kicked on his left and to win us the game. It just felt like that was the thing that was going to get us over the line. And then, of course, Sinclair kicked that goal early stage of the fourth quarter. But yeah, for me, that was the moment, the standout moment. I'll throw in a quick what if here, just to jump in before you. Because Isaiah Pickett, who was held honourably by Cunningham to a minimal impact, so we'll just say that, he definitely played on and chose to kick a goal, which ended out, I think it went out on, it wasn't a behind, I think it went out, right, for a boundary throw in. But then it comes back to McDonald. And is that the incident where Big Red Finger was involved? Was that goal?
I think so, yeah, because McDonald, there was a hold in the ball free kick, I think, and then it looked to me also like Pickett had just picked it up and played on. He dribbled the ball towards goal and it missed. Like you said, it went out of bounds. And I think that's when old mate with his big red finger was having a good chat.
So maybe he was just explaining to the umpire. So maybe it was a multifaceted jeer. It was, first of all, Dawson made an effort to get rid of it, even though the umpire said contrary to that. And then it was Pickett played on. And then it was McDonald, you're definitely not going to get this. And obviously he kicked a ripper. But yeah, that one hurt for me because it looked like that Pickett had played on for all money. I mean, you get a choice to play on. If you kick it and go for goal, that's play on, right?
It looked like it to me, yeah. I thought it was play on. But...
Look, I'm not saying that they couldn't then go and kick a goal from the boundary throw-in. That's equally as likely. But, in a game that was so close like this, and we obviously had our fair chance of opportunities the other end that we, we made the wrong decision or we didn't kick straight. So it's not, I'm not pinning this one incident to the final outcome, but it just, that one seemed very clear to me. Do you have any other what ifs, mate, before we move on?
I've got one. It's a very wishful what if, but what if there'd been just 5 more minutes in that game of footy? Because we lost by 9 points, and I really felt like the longer that went on, the more we were getting back into the game. And, 5 more minutes, a couple more goals, maybe we get the win, but it doesn't go that way. But that was my what if. What if we'd had a few more minutes at the end?
Yeah, we were definitely coming home with steam. And that's the thing, though. We actually probably should have kicked a couple of goals in that. We were putting so much pressure on them. They really kept it together well, and credit to them. But yeah, I guess that's one of the disappointing things, that this year we've managed to, in those close games where we've gotten the wins, we've managed to do what we needed to do to get ahead and stay in front. But this game, it was just one of those ones that eluded us this time, and that was, I guess, one of the things that made it feel so crushing. But Melbourne 8-0. Well, yeah, what are they? They potentially, if they win this weekend, 9-0. So yeah, I think we're going to talk about that later on. But we didn't win this time, but we played pretty well. A shame to lose, but oh well. All right, Stevo, let's look at the ABOB medal. So we talk about our 5 best players on the ground using the 5-4-3-2-1 scoring system, with 5 points being the best. Stevo, kick us off. Who did you have, mate?
5 votes, Callum Mills. 4 votes, Luke Parker. 3 to Dane Rampy. 2 to Dawson, and 1 to Hayward.
Fantastic, mate. I had Callum Mills for 5, Tom Hickey for 4, James Rowbottom for 3, Luke Parker for 2, and Jakey Lloyd for 1. So if I'm correct here, the players that we had different are Rampy, Dawson, Hayward, Rowie, and Lloyd. And the players we had similar were Mills, Parker, and add Hickey to the difference there. My apologies. So we only had Mills and Parker the same. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. That's it. Just those 2.
All right. Well, let's talk about Mills and Parker. So why those two guys? I mean, that you had them as 5 and 4. I had Mills 5 and Parker 2. So let's talk about their games.
Oh, look, I think we both agree, and we were chatting before that Mills was sensational. I mean, you talked about him playing a captain's like knock, and that's exactly what it was. Hey, like he was in everything. He was one of the players who was still grinding it out while we were under the pump and keeping us in the game, and he was one of the ones who was keeping us going at the end when we were a sniff. So I thought he was a clear best on ground for me.
Yeah, definitely. He was massive. And I think he looks better running through the mid. I know he's very, very good in the back line, but I just think that he when he gets his hands on the ball and links up plays and especially when he can drift forward and kick goals. And it was a shame that he didn't kick that second. I don't think it was actually, he didn't even get it behind in the end, but 33 disposals, 10 tackles, 6 clearances. He had a massive fantasy score. I'll talk about that later on. But yeah, he was awesome. So he's in the leadership group. He's probably the future captain of the club. Just also, is he looking like a bit more ripped than in recent years? There was one point when he kicked a goal and he sort of did that gorilla like, oh, come on. And I was like, well done, Cal. You're obviously working through the protein pretty well. He looked ripped.
He's certainly realized that it's a sport with sleeveless jumpers and you've got certain areas that you need to maximize, and he's doing well.
Well, a player who's known that for a while is obviously Lukey Parker, one of my all-time favourites. He was also very good, wasn't he? What stuck out in his game for you to have chosen him as 4 points, mate?
Again, just his constant presence at the contest. He's always there. He's in the right positions. He's a very, very, like, he wins a lot of the ball, but he also brings players into the game in the way that he uses the ball. He's got that explosive power. I mean, all the things that we've loved about him for many, many years, he's been putting on show consistently again this year. And I think that this weekend was another one.
Definitely. So 7 clearances, 7 inside 50s, 5 tackles, 4 marks, 32 disposals. Didn't get on the scoreboard. But yeah, he was massive. And I did sort of toss up to whether or not to have him higher in my 5-4-3-2-1, but he definitely had to get in there somewhere. All right, in terms of the players that we had different, do you want to talk about Rampy, Dawson, and Hayward before I talk about Hickey, Rowie, and Lloyd?
Yeah, sure. Look, Rampy, I think it's the case. I think I've said this before about Rampy. We kind of just I think we forget about him because we expect such a high level from him every single week because his basic is elite, and he doesn't fluctuate greatly, and very often he's one of our best players. And I think we missed him when he was out, and having him back, it settled everything down a lot. He played a very, very good defensive role, but also he was quite good offensively. That's why I had Rampy in there. 3 votes, and then Dawson. I think he's been really, really good all year. And he's been one of those guys who throughout the year has always been around about my 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th best on ground, but always consistently in that upper half for most of the games. And I think that this time he was able to really have a lot more impact and penetration with his disposal, maybe than others, which was why I had him higher. And then Hayward, again, I think small forwards, medium forwards tend to get overlooked, and that unless they kick 4 or 5 goals or at least 3 or 4 goals, and get 15 to 20 touches, we don't really consider them as having done what they've done. Often they've got a role to play, and I'm sure Hayward does within the team, but his impact on the scoreboard, he kicked 2 goals. We only got 8. So he's gotten 25% of our score. If we'd kicked 16 goals and he kicked 4, we'd probably think he had a great game. So I think that on that alone, plus he had 15 touches. I mean, he leads up to the ball. He puts really good pressure. So I quite liked his game. He had a couple of clangers, but, so does everyone. And that's how Hayward got into my votes this week.
Well done, mate. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I was still. I think I said off air. I was still a bit dirty about Hayward playing on after Sinclair's free kick against the Cats, but then he obviously went back and took that awesome mark in our D50 and then helped us win the game. So I must have just been holding on to that from the week prior. But yeah, he did have a good game in the end. I double checked his stats and you quite correctly get him in there for 1 point. For me, Tom Hickey, 4, Rowie 3, and Lloyd 1. Tom Hickey, so I think you mentioned that you were keen to see how Gawn and the Gawn and Hickey battle would go, and I know the commentators commented on throughout. Obviously, on paper, Max Gawn won the pure ruck battle, if you want to look at it like that, in terms of hitouts. I think it was 43-17. So the taller and heavier Gawn got over the Hickey in that regard. But clearances, so Hickey again was massive. He got 6 clearances. To Maxi got 3 clearances. So Hickey also scored a goal, and Max, I think he hit the post, so got it behind. But 16 disposals, 4 tackles. He helped around the tackle, around the ball there, and just I don't know. He just continues to be one of our best players. So I had to get him in there because I thought he did very well. I thought he was going to get monstered, and I don't think he did. I think he held his own and some. James Rowbottom, paddle bum, as some people call him. 22 disposals, 12 tackles, if you don't mind. He had 6 clangers, but we don't mind. I know he got caught holding the ball towards the end, but, I just thought he was massive. 4 marks. I think he posted his highest fantasy score, so it looked good on the number sheet as well. Look, I just think he's taken his game to another level this year. And this year is going to be obviously another transition year. We don't know how much longer Joey Kennedy's there. Mills has come into the midfield, so we're sort of in this sort of transition period where our next breed of elite midfielders are still sort of sometimes having good games and then learning and developing. But yeah, for me, this game, Rowie was massive because he stuck to Petrarca at times. But I just thought he deserved to be in the mix. 1 point, Jake Lloyd. So Lloydie again racked up the pill, 28 disposals, 7 marks. 4 inside 50s, and the goal, he went forward and kicked a goal, and that was actually a critical goal of the game because it was at that time when it looked like no one was scoring. So in comes Jakey Lloyd and said, "Give me the ball. I'm a quarterback, but I'll show you blokes how to do it." Kicks it from 50 pretty much, and I just thought that his all-round performance was fantastic, and so that's why I chose him. But if you've got nothing else to add there, mate, I'll move on to the fantasy update.
Yeah, just one thing which I found interesting actually when I was updating the tally for the Bevy of Bloods medal, that is Jake Lloyd's first vote of the year, and he was our best and fairest last year. So I thought that was interesting.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's see how he goes. Maybe he needs to drift forward and kick a goal every week. I won't use that as the barometer or the measure of his evaluating his game. But yeah, he also had a pretty good game. Like his kicking is still very good. But yeah, it's interesting that that's the first point of the year. So we'll see. We'll see how he goes for the rest of the year, mate. All right, fantasy update. So I'm going to give you a quick fantasy update on our fantasy team, a bevy of bloods consisting solely of current Swans and a few ex-Swans to cover injuries. Our top 5, we actually had 4 of the top 5 scores of the game. The highest scoring demon was Maxi Gawn on 109. In round 8, ABOB scored 1,491 points, which is not great because a lot of people were scoring about 2,000, 2,100. But we ranked 69,000th in that week, and we're currently sitting at 74,251st overall now. Our top 5 Swans were Mills on 133, which is the highest of the game. Rowbottom on 115, Lloyd on 115, Parker on 113, and Kennedy on 97. Lloyd as captain, so that was fantastic. So his 115 became 230 because you get double points for captains. On the flip side of that is missed out on Mills's 133 as captain. Every time I switch the captain, pretty much from Mills to Lloyd, the other player ends up scoring more. So it's a bit frustrating. But look, I was generally pretty happy with the scores overall. We still had 5 players who didn't play. So that's 5 players who have a big fat 0 next to them. So look, it obviously should tell the listeners if this isn't clear, if you're just tuning in now, this is purely just to keep an eye on the Swans. It's for the love of the game, for the love of the Bloods, and to see how they're going. I'm not endorsing anyone who wants to play fantasy in a real sense that they should do something like only have players from their team, because it makes it very limiting if you actually want to try and win the competition and the high lux that's on offer. But nevertheless, a bevy of bloods, we're still soldiering on. All right, in terms of the match review office, we've got a few comments here. Stephen May on Buddy in the first quarter. Careless conduct, low impact, high contact. That's fancy words for an accidental elbow to the jaw. Was fined $3,000, but can accept a $2,000 cost with an early plea. Hayden McLean was charged with striking Harrison Petty in the third quarter. I think it was a bit of a jumper grab, fist to the jaw, which is a bit of a shitty look. But anyway, he got fined with a fixed $2,500, but can accept a $1,500 early plea. And I think you had something else to mention from another club there, Stevo. What was that, mate?
Just Scott Lysette from Port Adelaide. There was the tribunal is on Tuesday night gave Scott Lysette from Port 4 weeks for a dangerous tackle, where he picked the bloke up and slung him to the ground. The bloke's head clunked to the ground. It did not look good. So he got 4 weeks for that, which is good because it's consistent, because 4 weeks is what happened the last time there was one like that with a dangerous tackle. But it still left us totally in the woods as to whether we understand how they protect the head with what we saw last week, for example, with the Fritsch elbow or with the McCartan punch. So fantastic that they're locking down on the dangerous tackle and protecting the player's head in this situation. I'm totally happy about that, but it's still a bit murky with everything else. Port Adelaide can appeal tomorrow, Wednesday, if they have the chance to appeal. Let's see if they appeal that. Let's hope that they don't, because it was so clear. I don't know. Yeah, I think that 4 for that was very fair.
Yeah, and let's hope I think it was Ned McHenry who was the young player who got slung. So hopefully he makes a full recovery. And I don't think Lysette did it. He didn't mean to do it, but he was just bigger and stronger, and he certainly had a duty of care to the smaller and younger Ned McHenry there. But look, Port running well, and they've got Petey Laddams, and they've also got another ruck, I think Sam Hayes, in the wings there. So I think they'll do okay. It's just Lysette hopefully learning from the incident, and others looking at that as the benchmark, I guess, and other players looking out for their fellow players. All right, Steve, let's move on to segment 2. A few hot topics in the AFL. Going to have a quick chat about a few things going on in general in the AFL and VFL. So, Steve, give us a quick VFL update.
Not really much to talk about with the VFL, at least for the Swans this week. Their round 4 match against KC Demons was supposed to be played in Melbourne over the weekend, and it was postponed. They weren't able to get the fixture. There was some COVID stuff in New South Wales, I guess, which led to the postponement of that one. So we're not sure yet when it's going to be played, but I was looking at the fixture ahead, and both teams, both Casey and the Swans, actually have the bye in round 6, which is next week. So a week from now. So maybe they replay the fixture then, or they play the fixture then, and that fixes that quite quickly, but we'll see how it goes. And then next up is going to be the curtain closer against Collingwood. So if I understood right, they're going to play the Swans versus Collingwood seniors, like AFL, in the afternoon. And then after that's finished, then they're going to play the reserves once they've got everyone off the field. Is that right?
You've heard that correctly, and you've read that correctly, and I'm still scratching my head on that one. But I think your first question to me during the week was, are they're going to keep the bars open? And I was like, Steve, that's a bloody good question. I feel, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe they've been listening to us complaining about the seconds not playing on the SCG, so they're finally doing it, but they're sort of close but no cigar, aren't they? So you would think that you'd open early, have them on the ground from like 9 or something, and then we'll play the seniors at 1:45, I think is first bounce. But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about that one, mate?
Look, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not going to the games. I mean, Finland, as those who are listening regularly are aware. And I mean, for me, it's actually nice because it's on at a more reasonable time. Because often with the time difference, the reserves is on at like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. So I don't mind at all. But for the supporters going to the ground, I think it's a different thing, and that's what it should be about: is making sure that those really keen Swans fans that want to get along and watch the reserves can do it. And I don't know, maybe this is what people want. I don't know where the decisions come from.
I mean, look, it would be, it is a fantastic opportunity to hang around and watch the twos have a game on the big stage. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's usually for me, it's a big day at the footy. There's a lot of beers involved. So I honestly don't know if I'll be still standing by that point, mate. Look, either way, it's good there on the SCG. So look, we probably shouldn't complain too much. I just want to add two things there. Going back to your comments about the Casey Demons, found out during the week that an ex-Swan by the name of Zach Foote is having a run around with the Casey Demons. So it was obviously delisted at the end of last year, one of the unfortunate delistings through, coronavirus related reductions. So it's good to see him, having an opportunity down there with the Demons. It's going to be really interesting to see how he goes against his I guess his ex teammates and stuff when we hopefully play the Demons in that bye round. The other thing, I just want to make a quick apology. Last week, I mistakenly thought that Robbie Fox had taken a spectacular mark against the Dockers in Tasmania, but what my brain was, I wasn't able to accurately get out of my mouth was that Robbie Fox's, I think, home local club is the Burnie Dockers. So from Tasmania. So he's from location Burnie, and their team mascot is the Dockers, Steve. So like your Turku Dockers over there in Finland. So just a quick apology there for making that mistake. Otherwise, yeah. In terms of the next topic, Steve-O, the question here is, are the Demons the real deal in 2021? I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm very keen to hear them play out now.
It's a tough question, actually, because I haven't really watched Melbourne much this year, because by the time you watch the Swans each week and you watch the game between the top couple of teams each week, and then it's a lot of footy you already get to watch in a weekend. So the first time I watched Melbourne closely was against Richmond 2 weeks ago, and they played really well. They were all over them. And then now against the Swans, and I don't know. I think it's one of those years where there's not really a clear standout. And Melbourne is one of, 6 or 7 teams, like I alluded to before a bit, with fair claims. And I would say that is the current top 8 plus the Swans as a bit of an outside chance. And the Demons at their best are as good as any of those teams in that bracket. And sentimentally, I would love to see Melbourne do well this year. So everything I say from here on in, which is going to be questioning their credentials, is done purely as an academic exercise, but I hope that if the Swans don't win the flag, it's a Demons Lions grand final, and I'll be happy whoever wins. But my big worry with their list is that they don't have that many A-graders. I think, and I was chatting with my brother about this the other day, and he follows the other teams' lists quite closely. And he was saying that, they've got a lot of B-graders that are the sort of giving them maximum at the moment. So that second tier of players right now is really going very, very well. But what happens when they drop off? And then we think of who those next level guys are that weren't maybe so amazing versus the Swans. Like Pickett and Fritsch both weren't really that present. And Pickett is a guy who I kind of feel for because he's young. He's a very young player. He's getting a lot of media attention. He shouldn't be expected to be a dominant match winner just yet.
They likened him to Cyril Rioli. So
yeah.
there's a healthy dose of pressure for a young player. But
that's it. Like, he's great, but at the moment, like what he is, he's not an established match winner. He's an up and comer that has a very good highlight reel, is what where he's at. Who could be anything, but at the moment, still not proven. Fritsch is another one who's a bit like that. Even if they're keys, like they're really big gun guys, they're just thrown a lot of money at Petrarca and a very long contract. And he's had really one very strong season and the start of a second strong season. So even there, I mean,
so who else do you consider? Sorry to cut in. Who else do you consider to be their A grade, their premium players? So Petrarca's in that. Who else?
Yep. So if we start from the back line, I would say Lever and May are a very, very good defensive pairing.
Yep.
And then the center. So then Gawn, Petrarca, Oliver, probably Viney when he's playing, and then forward half not so much.
So you wouldn't have Ben Brown or even Tom McDonald in that discussion. You consider those guys B plus players or B graders?
Yeah, they're very good players, but they're like, and we were talking about this before and thinking, okay, McDonald and Brown, they did very well against the Swans, but I wouldn't want to be relying on those two guys to kick 70% of the score every week like they did against Sydney to get that win. As a forward pairing, and this is why I've got a bit of an issue with the Bulldogs as well, because their forward pairing of Bruce and Norton aren't, reliable, bankable match winners either. I'd much rather be Geelong with Hawkins and Cameron, or Richmond with Riewoldt and Lynch, or Brisbane with Danaher and Hipwood, or West Coast with Kennedy and Darling. I'd much rather be relying on those pairs of players to win me a crunch final ahead of McDonald and Brown. I'm not saying they can't do it, but I'd have far more confidence if I had one of those other pairings up there, I guess.
Yeah, I can see your point. I do agree with that. I mean, Hawkins and Cameron, I think we saw how they played against the Tigers last week. They're looking quite formidable, and you're throwing Gazro in there as well. And we know Riewoldt and Lynch can get it done. So I see what you mean there in that regard. But I mean, we've spoken about this before, and this is a bit of a comment without notice. But each team will probably have a core of elite players around that 5, 6, 7, if you're lucky, 8 members. So if you're including Lever, May, Petrarca, Oliver, Viney, Gawn, that's 7. Is that enough to balance and make sure that those B players, when they do have their off weeks, there's other role players, there's if we look at them, the Neil Bullens, I guess Spargo, he had a few moments throughout our game. Who else? Christian Salem, he's a very good player. So is he in your A or your B grade there?
He's probably hovering somewhere in between. I don't think he's an out-and-out gun of the AFL, because really what they're doing at the moment is they're not, because when you talk about where these players are on the field, one's a ruckman and 2 are key defenders. So then they don't have as much forward of the ball. And they're not really scoring. Like, their defense has been fantastic this year, and many commentators are pointing to the strength of the defense, which is really good. And they've conceded the least points in the AFL, but they're only 6th for points scored. And they're only a couple of points ahead of the team who is 7th for points scored. So my question with Melbourne is, do they have enough reliable avenues to goal if other teams are able to up their scoring and get through this Melbourne defensive system, which has been very successful for 8 weeks? But then what happens when the top coaches start to gradually pick it apart as the season goes? Do they have enough firepower to go the other way when all of a sudden they're conceding, say, 80 points a week rather than 65, 70? I'm not sure.
And I think one of your points there is a big one, that we kept Fritsch and Pickett to having a minimal impact. When this guy's been kicking bags, right, Fritsch? So we did very well to keep both him and Pickett, who's also kicked. I think he's kicked in games 2, 3, 4, up to 4 goals a game, I think, this year. So we did well in that regard. But I think the Dees fans, that they always talk about what's his nickname, Wiedemann. I'm forgetting his nickname, but it's something like, it's not Woosha, it's something like that. But no, obviously that's the ex Brisbane Bombers coach, isn't it? But so he himself, Wiedemann, has been kicking bags in the VFL. We're talking like 7 goals, 5 goals, 3 goals. So there's another genuine goal kicker waiting to come in. It's just that they've got a healthy competition problem. I don't know, mate. Maybe I don't see it like you, because the other thing is, right, 8-0, they're potentially going to go 9-0. The last time they were 9-0 was what were you saying, when Melbourne last hosted the Olympic Games, 1956, right? So it's understandable why some of the Dees fans are starting to get very excited, and I probably would too. But you want to remain a little bit calm, because obviously they haven't won a flag since 1964. It's the current longest premiership drought in the AFL. So I think they've got a lot to be happy about, but I also think that your comments there are valid. It's just going to be one of those things that the Demons need to be able to step up as a club and manage to make sure they become that sort of Richmond style. When your gun players are off, you've got that B graders, filling in the void, and then vice versa. But do you think they can win, Stevo, the flag? I know you said you'd be happy if it was a Dees Lions grand final and that potentially the Dees get up, but do you think they can win?
Yeah, I absolutely think they can win. I guess my points are more just based around the idea that it's a long, long way until September still. So there's a lot that can change between now and then. And we're not really sure yet with Melbourne, is there improvement this year mostly on the back of improved application to defensive structures? If so, what happens if and when other teams find a way through these structures or start to replicate them? Do they have the talent to still beat the better teams? And this thing about kicking the score, because if you're relying on these two, McDonald and Brown up forward, and then Pickett and Fritsch also to kick your goals. Pickett and Fritsch both certainly have days where they kick, 3 or 4 or 5, or I think Fritsch even kicked a 6 a couple of weeks ago. But they're also still players that are capable of having days where they kick none or 1 or 2, and that's so they're not bankable goals each week. They're going to fluctuate, and if teams can target these players and take them out of the game, then they need avenues to goal that go beyond them, and then I guess if you look at it. If you compare them to Richmond, a lot of Richmond's money, a lot of their superstars, they're in their midfield and their forward. So they've got Lynch and Rivold, who are 2 superstar forwards up there, and who inside that forward 50 for Melbourne is going to be the match winner consistently in September is my big question on them.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, yeah, look, they do have Harms and Melksham, and as I said before, Neil Bullen, Andy Brayshaw, yeah, the one that wears the headgear. Yeah, so look, they've got these players that can. I'm certainly not comparing them to Dusty or anything like that, but yeah, I hear your point. But yeah, I don't know. I think they can also get to the grand final. But yeah, I also think that your point that it's a long season, and they might want to reserve some of their excitement. It's hard not to get swept up in it because it would be a good story, and it'd be fantastic to share it round, and it not just be Richmond again. But yeah, we'll obviously follow it with interest. But yeah, I think that they're good points that you bring up, mate. I just want to very quickly have a shout out. Thursday night team announcements are coming back. And I'm super stoked about this because this is a fantasy implication. So what happened up until now is there was a rolling 24-hour. So 24 hours before first bounce, a team would be announced. So this would create havoc for fantasy players because you'd have to keep watching every day to be able to see who's in and out of your team to manage the injuries and laid-outs and stuff like that. What used to happen before coronavirus is that all teams playing on the weekend would be announced on Thursday night. If you're playing on the Sunday or the Monday games, then you would basically announce an extended squad, and then you'd be able to refine that as you got closer to the game. But basically, you knew who was going to be on your field. So that's how it used to be. The AFL sent out a poll, I think, on Twitter, you said, where they asked their fans, I think it was about 13,000 people that participated, what would you rather, 24-hour rolling announcement or traditional Thursday night? And 94.5% of fans said Thursday night, please. So the AFL have listened, and they are responding accordingly. And so from round 10, they're going to bring Thursday night teams back in. And I'm pumped about this. I love this. I don't know if you've got a position on this. Do you have any thoughts?
It's not something that really affects me, but I think if a lot of fans want it, then I think it's important that that's done. It's not something that costs anyone anything. It's also one of those things where they've taken something away and now become the hero for giving back what they took away in the first place, which is always an interesting approach to administration. But yeah, I think great. If that makes fans happy, then good.
Bit of self-PR there for the AFL. Yeah, but I think a few coaches were against it. We won't name any names, but it wasn't a majority of coaches. I think it was a minority of coaches who would rather have that flexibility. But again, I think, most teams know who they're playing. I think we've said last week or the week before, most coaches would know who they're playing within, half an hour of a game finishing, basically, So to hear other coaches saying they don't know who's going to play sometimes, up to an hour before the game sounds like a bit of a cop-out. But anyway, we won't go into details there. All right, mate, we're going to push on to segment 3, which looks at the round ahead. In this last section, we're going to focus on 3 games, most importantly, the Swans next game, and then 2 other games of interest, one introduced by you, Stevo, and one by me. And then after that, we're going to finish up with the rest of our tips for the round. So game 2 of round 9 is a home game for the now 6th place Bloods, taking place this Saturday, the 15th of May at the SCG against the 16th place Collingwood Magpies, with first bounce at 1:45 p.m. local time. All right, Stevo, so after the game against the Dees, how did we pull up? What's our injury status?
Pretty good out of that game, if I remember right. We didn't have any major injuries out of that one, did we?
No, nil listed, I think.
Yeah, and Blakey wasn't used, the medical sub. Like, Blakey didn't come on as the medical sub, so.
So should be all. So okay, let's assume that we're all safe there. Okay, so then it will be a matter of strategy. Are there any players that may look like they would be omitted based on form?
On form, I think that O'Riordan probably, and then Hewitt could come in for him. I mean, O'Riordan, he played pretty well against Geelong. He wasn't really that great against Melbourne. And if Hewitt is totally through with his concussion, and he was named as an emergency, I think last week anyway, which suggests that he was fairly close. So if Hewitt's good to go, then maybe Hewitt comes in for O'Riordan on form.
Yeah, I think that's probably where my mind is at the moment. And I think they've said yesterday or today that Isaac Heaney is looking likely to come back in. He had a week off from his ankle, got it a bit jammed up, I think was the wording they used. But we also commented after the Cats game that Heaney didn't look quite fit, and we thought maybe it had something to do with him having relatively rushed back from that broken hand. This is the second Swanee wearing a glove at the moment, the other being Robbie Fox after his finger injury. But yeah, I think if Heaney's fit, he comes back in. But who comes out?
It would mean changing the structure a little bit, but I would be interested to see whether they would consider bringing Heaney in for Sinclair, because Heaney can play as a key marking target, albeit not at all, but still he does draw the football. So that would be one that I reckon they might look at, because they've got McLean to help out with the ruck with Hickey. So they don't need three chop out ruckmen, I don't think, on the field. Heaney could come in for him.
Would you keep Sinclair over McLean?
No, not at the moment. I think McLean I think he showed in that game where he kicked 4 goals that he's very much capable of doing well at AFL level, and I would much rather them. It's a bit of a coin flip in terms of who gives the most to the team. I'd rather them continue to develop a young coming player than a bloke who's probably on his last year or two of his contract.
Fair play. This is actually one we probably should have, or I should have brought up in the what if section. Hayden McLean took 2 marks. I think it was 2, and they weren't paid. Do you remember the ones I'm talking about?
I don't actually. Sorry, I don't remember.
Oh, Stevo, you're killing me. He took 2 marks and they played it on. And anyway, so he very easily could have kicked 2 goals, because I think they would have been fairly easy set shots on goal. So, his 0 goal effort, it turns out being 2, and that might have got us over the line. So we'd be talking very differently about Hayden McLean this week if that came to pass. Obviously, a lot of ifs in there. But other one we want to talk about is Campbell. Obviously, no VFL game this weekend. Game before, I think he had 25 disposals, a bunch of tackles, looked very good. That was against the Cats in that close loss. Does he make his way in? And if so, who for?
Yeah, we talked about this too, and I was also chatting to my brother about this, and he suggested the idea of bringing Campbell in to play more of maybe a half forward, small forward role rather than off half back, because the half back line seems to be quite stacked and fairly well set with who's in there at the moment. Would you bring in Campbell for Wicks? Because Wicks has looked like he's probably needed a bit of a rest for the last couple of weeks. And we forget, because Wicks has been around for a couple of years on the list, I think we forget that he still is a very young guy who is, learning football, and he's not someone that we should look at being like a 24, 25-year-old, because he's not. So he's a guy who's probably going to need time in and out of the team as well. Just because he's not a new draftee doesn't mean that he doesn't need that. Yeah, it's a possibility at least. And maybe it'll help Errol Goulden too, because I think the two of them are a good little 1-2 combination. So maybe the two of them on the field might spark Goulden up a bit.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, Goulden keeps for me over Wicks. And look, Campbell, I think, played the majority of his footy around the ball. So, is a midfielder, but also, if anything, is more of a forward mid. So I think it was the Swans who asked him this year upon drafting him to get back to the halfback line and become a bit of a quarterback there. So, I mean, he may have played some of that in junior footy, but I think predominantly he was a midfielder who drifted forward and kicks goals. So I think it might be more natural for him. I'd certainly be stoked to see him back in the team. Wicks has played very good over the opening rounds, and when he's not kicking goals, he is putting on pressure. But I think you're right; it may be time for him to have a rest as well. But I think the way they've gone, they'll probably bring Blakey back in. So, because he's just been hanging around the fringes there for the past couple of weeks. So, but that said, there's also Dylan Stevens who got dropped after one game, which was a bit of a shame. But yeah, how about Amati or McDonald? Would they come in for anyone, do you think, mate? Or they need a couple more games in the VFL?
Yeah, I'd probably want to see them play. And again, it's a shame that there was no VFL last week, but yeah, see them play VFL once or twice more before bringing either of them back in, because McDonald was just starting to find his feet a bit in the VFL. So yeah, another week probably couldn't hurt.
Yeah, fair enough. I think for Collingwood, they've had a couple of outs, and that's Roughhead and Murphy, who was subbed out of the last week's game with concussion. And I think the Pies were keen to play them, but the AFL came down hard and said, no, they need a couple more days off because they left the field under concussion protocol. And the Magpies said, sorry, yes, understood. Jeremy Howe, who's obviously a gun, I think he is going in for hamstring surgery, unfortunately, so he'll be out. I think their ins were, I think we're reading on the AFL app, who are they saying? They're bringing Will Kelly and potentially Finn McRae in for those two guys. So we'll have to wait and see how they go with teams. But in terms of which Swanee flies high, who is that and why?
Oh, look, I'm not doing well on this. I said Wicks last week. He didn't do much. This week, I'm going to go for something fairly bankable and say Franklin to kick 5+ on the back of some improved delivery inside 50 and a lot more opportunities against a weaker team. We should hopefully get a lot more goals. So Franklin to have a good day.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a bad bet. I picked Hayward last week, and obviously he kicked 2-1, but I was a bit down on him, even though you picked him in your ABOB top 5. But I'm going to go with a player that you had in your top 5 against the Dees. I'm going to pick Rampy to stick to Jordan De Goey like glue and limit his influence. He kicked 6 goals against the Roos last week, so he's one of these players, a bit of a confidence player. You want to make sure that he doesn't run rampant there. So hopefully we can get Rampy on him there. So that's my prediction. In terms of the Collingwood players we need to be wary of, obviously did mention Jordan De Goey. I know you've got a couple of comments on him. What are they, Stevo?
Oh, look, I mean, when he gets up and about, he can be a match winner. He kicked a whole bunch of goals last week, and he's the sort of player you don't want to let get isolated inside 50. So the whole defensive group is going to have to work to negate his influence. A lot of it comes down to his work ethic and how hard he's prepared to work. I mean, okay, he kicked 6 goals last week or 5 goals or something against, let's be honest, a barely
6-3, I think. Yeah, 6-3.
So let's see how he goes against a defensive setup which is AFL standard, because to be fair, at the moment North Melbourne are really very, very close to not being AFL standard. So hopefully a good defensive effort from the whole team will negate him.
Yeah, I mean, he was up. He was a guy. The guy marking him he's not a renowned back. I think his name was Bono. He's an ex-GWS player, and I think he actually ended up hurting his ankle, maybe even breaking it. But so I don't know if it was part of that. But yeah, the Roos are a whole separate topic. I think we're going to talk about them in the coming weeks. But for me, mate, last week against the Dees, Hickey v Gawn was one of the things we're looking forward to. We're up against another massive, one of the gun rucks of the competition in Brodie Grundy. I'm keen to see how Hickey can go against Grundy, who's probably been a little bit in better form than Max Gawn, especially in the past couple of weeks. So I'm very curious to see how Hickey stacks up against Grundy there, and hope that he can do the job as he did against Gawn. Otherwise, Darcy Moore is a gun, and he had a huge game against the Roos. Again, it was the Roos, so keep a lid on. But he's a fantastic player. He really is he's just one of these players that can really turn the fortunes of a team, just with his intercept marking and his long delivery off the defensive 50. It was probably his best game he ever had last week, especially in the numbers sense. But I think we need to try and minimize his impact. So maybe there's at times a forward tag, but he's a pretty big unit, so I don't know who'd put on him, but he's just a player I think we should look out for. In terms of what do we need to do to come away with a victory, what are your thoughts there, Stevo?
Look, I mean, it sounds simple, but just be switched on and play our best football. I mean, if the Swans are a legitimate side that wants to play finals this year, then these are games they simply have to win, and they need to turn up to play these ones. They can't rock up with the same attitude that there was against the Gold Coast, which was just a bit blasé, and then boom, we got belted by a team that will not play finals in any no chance at all of playing finals this year, I wouldn't say. And Collingwood certainly has no chance of playing finals, and our best footy can beat them, so they just have to bring it.
Yeah, it's fair call, mate. I didn't mention them before, but players like Steele Sidebottom and the evergreen Scott Pendlebury, these are guys that I think we need to keep our eye on. Obviously, Taylor Adams is still out, but we really need to limit their, I guess, influence in the middle, because if those guys start to rack up the ball like they can and use it well, then that's where maybe Jordan De Goey, Myercheck get a bit free, and then they can run away with it. And look, we're going to look at the form and their head-to-head next. And obviously you said that the Pies are probably a very small chance of making finals this year, and that's fair enough. They've won 2 games and lost 6. Their last 5 have been loss, win. Whereas we're 5-3, we're in the 8. We're dropping down the 8, but we're still in there. Our last 5, we've had a win, a loss, a win, a loss. So, you would say on form, we're the better team. But, we were the better team against the Suns away, who absolutely pumped us. So, yeah, as you're saying, we just need to be switched on and play well otherwise. Because when we look at the head-to-head especially, Collingwood have had our measure really over the past 4 games at least. So being very close games, but Collingwood has won 3 of the last 4. So if you include 2016, it's been 2 to the Swans and 3 to Collingwood. But we'll remove that one because that was at ANZ and it was a massive score for the Swans. It was 133 to 53. Swans winning in a massive way there. So we'll pull that one out. And then we look at 2017 onwards. The Pies beat us 80 to 79. We beat them, that's at the SCG. We beat them in 2018, 73-71 at the SCG. 2019, they beat us 80 to 73 at the SCG. And then last year, they beat us 40 to 51 at the Gabba during a coronavirus world. So close games, and the Pies have had the head-to-head wins. So I think it's a dangerous game for us. I don't think we can't take this easy. Interestingly, the last game that we played against the Pies in Melbourne at the MCG was in 2013. That was a while ago. So I don't know. It's a bit of an anomaly there, I think. But did you have anything to add to the head-to-head there, Stevo?
No, not really. I mean, you can look back. We only play Collingwood usually once a year, don't we? So, it's hard to draw too much from the head-to-heads, and where we're at this year versus where Collingwood is at is very different places. So we should win this.
Yeah, it'd be disappointing if we don't. I think your last game that you ever went to was that 2017 one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah. And the last game that I went to before that actually was the 2012 grand final. And then it was 5 years between games. And yeah, round 3, 2017, we lost to Collingwood by a point coming off our grand final year, the year before in 2016. Actually, I looked at the team list and I put you on the spot beforehand to try and guess how many of those players from the 22 who played in that 2017 game are still even on the list. And you managed to get most of them. I was pretty impressed. You nailed just about everyone. But yeah, 9 of the 22 that played in that game 4 years ago are no longer at the club. So Aaliyah, Foote, Grundy, Hanbury, Jack, Jones, Marsh, Newman, Smith, all gone, which shows you just how much football teams turn over in a very short period. That's 4 years. That's nothing. And half that team almost is gone.
Yeah, it's quite a turnaround, isn't it? Aaliyah most recently.
Yeah.
Well, Hickey's making up for it. So anyway. All right, Stevo, if a group of Swans is called a bevy, then what is a group of Magpies called?
The most common one is a flock. Everyone talks about a flock of magpies, although that was pretty boring. So I did a bit more deep Googling, and the amount of people who post this stuff on internet forums is unbelievable. I had dozens of options. The one that I chose was a mischief of magpies. So yeah, the bevy of bloods versus the mischief of magpies this week.
That's way better because look, when I think of flock, I think of seagulls. You know, when I think of the Collingwood Footy Club, I think of mischief and mayhem. So I think that's perfect, mate. They're in a bit of a world of hurt at the moment, but we won't spend too much time on that. Sorry, I just had a quick apology. Last week, I made a few errors in the head-to-head against the Dees, so I got a few of my stats there wrong. So make sure that I get them right going forward and triple check them for against Collingwood. So I've got confidence there. All right, mate. We're going to look at a couple of games of interest, non-Swans related, and I think you are going to introduce your game from now. Let us know.
Here we go. This is the big battle of the bottom of the ladder this week because we felt that we spend a lot of time focusing on the teams that are contenders, which means that that our previews tend to focus on those. So this week we thought we'd go to the bottom of the table because we've got 17th versus 18th playing for the pride of Tasmania, really, because it's Hawthorn versus North Melbourne, both the teams who are partially connected to Tasmania, playing in Launceston. So it's a Hawthorn home game at 2:10 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, 15th of May. And it's actually quite an interesting game because there's a lot of pride on the line because no one wants to be the worst team in the AFL. And it could well be that the result of this game, plus a bit of percentage, ends up deciding that as we get towards the end of the season. So, yeah, interesting match. Ins and outs, we got Hawks have got a bunch of ins. So some good ones. Gunston, O'Meara, and possibly even Burgoyne to come back in for Hawthorn. So some of their fringe players will have to make way for them. And North have got Bonar and Stevenson out. And probably Dumont, who's been good in the VFL, and Phillips, who was last week's sub, their number 3 draft pick, who they curiously took ahead of Logan McDonald. But thank you very much, North Melbourne, for doing that. We are very much grateful that their forward line doesn't read McDonald. And now, I mean, it'd be great to have young Phillips in our midfield. I'm sure it'd be fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but I'm very glad we got the one we got. So that's their ins and outs. Looking at their form, I mean, pretty awful. It's the bottom 2 teams, right? So Hawthorn have won one of their past 7 matches. 2 of their past 8, both by almost nothing. They won a game by a point and a game by 3, both against the Bombers and the Crows, who aren't, going to contend this year. North haven't won a game all year. If we look back in time a bit, North Melbourne have actually only won 1 of their last 23 games, and Hawthorn have won only 4 of their past 21. Which is pretty bad form lines for both teams. Yeah, pretty ordinary. they've won like 4 out of 40 or 5 out of 40 between the pair of them, which is pretty bad. Tracking it a bit over 10% combined. Sam Mitchell. He's long gone. Who's the other?
X1, Tom Mitchell.
Tom Mitchell. Sam Mitchell's now coaching somewhere, right? Tom Mitchell.
Box Hill Hawks.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Sam Mitchell will not play. He could probably help out North, to be fair, but even at current form. But Tom Mitchell, he chopped it up last week against the Eagles. 41 touches, another dominant game from him they'll be hoping for. Wingard is a genuine match winner. I don't really think North have got an answer for him if he gets up and going. I think Jack Zeeble is probably going to have to lead the team and carry it on his back again if they're going to have any chance of a win. But I don't really think that they will win. I think that the Hawks are in a bit of a hole, but the Roos are in a very, very, very big hole. And at least the Hawks have shown that they know how to win games this year. So I'm picking Hawthorn to win this one.
I think that's probably the smart pick. And I think that that's at University of Tasmania in Launceston. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I
think that's the Hawks ground. And then the Roos usually play in Bellerive, down in Hobart.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of an away game for them. So you would say that the Hawks will get it. But just for spice and for interest, I'm going to say the Roos are going to do it, mate. They're going to have a win.
I hope so, really. just for the sake of everyone who is connected to that football club.
Those poor shin boners. Hey, mate, I'm going to introduce Power and the Bulldogs. Okay, so third place, Port Adelaide Power play against second place Western Bulldogs at Adelaide Oval on Saturday, the 15th of May from 7:40 p.m. local time. After round 8 for the Power, I think Houston had hurt his arm, so he's not looking good. There was word of Boak maybe re-injuring either a quad or an ankle or something, so we'll have to watch him. In terms of ins and outs, either Bonner or Leonard, who were being looked at to come in last week or the week before, they'll probably come in for Houston, one of those guys. Going back to your comment about Lysette with his 4-game ban, or could be 3, subject to appeal, but say maybe Laddams or Hayes comes in for him. In terms of the Dogs, Lockie Hunter, I think, broke his hand and played on throughout the game against the Blues last week. So I think that was there for the Dogs. That was their only injury. That's a big out. He's a good player. Karmas, who had his debut, I think he probably holds unless they want to change things up. I don't know if Jamara is going to have his long-awaited, much-talked-about debut. Certainly not for Bruce or Norton, as we touched on earlier, but I guess it depends on the ruck setup. I think Steph Martin's still out. Tim English is looking to come back in after that concussion from Norton's knee. But yeah, it just depends if maybe Jordan Sweet holds as well. So it'd be interesting to see who they roll with when they announce teams on. Still rolling. It's round 9, isn't it? So round 10 is from Thursday. In terms of the last 5 form and win-loss, the Power are running pretty well. They're 6-2. They're obviously coming third. They've beat Richmond, beat Carlton, beat the Saints, lost again, got smashed against the Lions, and then beat Adelaide in that showdown. So Port have 25 wins and the Crows have 24 wins. So they're currently winning the showdown ledger there. Those 2 losses, 37-point beating to the West Coast Eagles and a 49-point win to the Lions. In terms of the Dogs, they have beat the Brisbane Lions, beat the Suns, beat the Giants, lost against Richmond for their first loss of the year, and then beat Carlton after giving Bulldogs fans a hard attack because they were down with 3 points, I think halfway. It was either the 3rd or the 4th, but they came home strong anyway and got the win, so that was lucky. So they're sitting 7-1, obviously sitting at second. And that one loss was against Richmond, as I said, for their first loss of the year. In terms of key players for the Power, Rosie had a big game last week, so I'm going to put him in there as their first key player. Otherwise, for me, it's Ollie Wines, Carl Amon, Charlie Dixon, and our much-loved Alir Alir. For the Dogs, it's the Bont. It's always going to be the Bont. He's a gun player. I love him. I think we should maybe have a look at him, but I don't think the Dogs will ever let him go. Caleb Daniel looks like he's in a bit of form again, so he's always dangerous. Shalaw's looking very good. How could the Pies let him go? Jack McRae, always good, and Josh Bruce kicked another bag last week. So you'd say that he's the reason keeping Jamari Ugle-Hagan out. In terms of the Power, they responded to criticism of being flat track bullies by winning at home in Adelaide. So I don't know what that proved, but anyway, and they got the prison bars out in there too afterwards. After we touched on that last week, so that was good to see, I guess. The Dogs came behind, as I mentioned earlier, from against the hapless Blues last week and very nearly lost it, but they came home strong and ended up winning, I think, by 20 odd points. So, look, they've looked better more often, other than that loss against Richmond. But I have to say, just being at home, my tip is that the Power should win in a tight one, but it's really home ground advantage getting them over the line.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, Port to win.
All right. Fair call, mate. I'll do the rest of the round very quickly. Game 1, 11th place Saints versus 4th place Cats at Marvel on Friday night. I'm going Cats.
Yep, Cats.
Game 2, we've got the Swans and Pies. We're both going the Swannies. Can't you Swannies? Game 3, it's the Hawks and the Roos, and I'm going the Roos and you're going the Hawks. Game 4, we've got 12th place Suns versus 5th place Lions as a Q clash, as they like to call it, at Metricon Stadium in the Gold Coast on Saturday twilight. I'm going the Lions.
Is that what they really call it? The Q Clash? It sounds like
I think that's what they call it. It sounds like some sort of
snooker tournament, doesn't it? What a stupid name.
CUE. I get it. Yeah. Gotcha. Or something like a fight you have with someone at the shopping market in the queue.
Where you're lining up in your COVID toilet paper frenzy.
Give me that pack of toilet paper. Yeah, exactly. We're really stretching here. Okay, so game 5, 8th place Giants versus 9th place Tigers. And this was one we were going to look at, but we thought we'd spread the love. This is at Marvel, an away game. No, an away game for the Tigers, did we say? Or a home game?
Home game.
Home game for the Tigers. Okay. Home game for the Tigers on Saturday night. I'm going Giants.
Yeah, I was torn on this. I'm going to stick with my... No, I'm going to flip. I'm going to say Giants too, because I just learnt that Richmond's missing half their midfield for this game. So
they got a lot of outs.
I'm gonna swing to the Giants actually.
Yeah, I think Shea Bolton, who took that screaming mark. Oh my God, I lost it, and I was sending you like so many texts. But yeah, that guy who I've said over many podcasts this year that I just think is a gun player. He's out. I think there was an altercation in a nightclub and he's broken his hand or something. So, hopefully he's okay. But I just think, the Tigers have too many players out at the moment. Game 6, we've got this is Power and the Dogs. We're both going Power. Game 7, 15th place Bombers versus 10th place Dockers at Marvel on Sunday afternoon. I'm going Bombers here.
Yeah, I'm not tipping Fremantle away. No way. Essendon.
Yeah, fair call. Game 8, we've got the first place Demons against the 13th place Blues, the only game of the round at the MCG, so that was nice of them. Sunday twilight, picking the Demons.
9 in a row for Melbourne, yes, Demons.
9 in a row for the Legion, mate. Game 9, last game of the round, we've got 7th place Eagles versus 14th place Crows, so another battle of the birds there. That's over in Perth on Sunday twilight. I'm picking the Eagles at home.
Yep, definitely. They're starting to look a bit ominous, the West Coast.
Yeah, it was nice for them to finally get a win away and for us to have picked them losing, and they end up smashing the Hawks, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They won pretty well.
Cheeky buggers. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. On behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. We look forward to you joining us next time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Bevy of Bloods for updates and announcements. Until then, up the Bloods and Carn you Swannies.